There we go. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jennifer Neel and then hand the floor over to her. So Jennifer currently resides in her home state of Indiana and paints landscapes, still life, and portraits primarily from life. Jennifer graduated from Covenant College with a BA in Fine Arts. She spent time learning from Alan Roberts, John Gasparich, and the Leo Marchutz School of Painting and Drawing Community in Aix-en-Provence, France, in different capacities between 2014 and 2018. Her studies have taken her to Giverny, France, and Venice, Italy, where she painted plein air landscapes. We are delighted to feature Jennifer and her work this month. And now I would like to pass over the floor to Jennifer.
Hi, welcome everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces and to also see some people I haven't met before. So thank you so much for coming. I thought I would just I'm just gonna sort of talk freehand here. Just talk a little bit about how I came to Marchutz and I and what I learned there and what I'm doing now. So I first heard about Marchutz when I was a sophomore in college at Covenant College. I'd always just really wanted to study abroad, and I'd wanted to study in France and study art, but I I didn't want to be taking my classes in French. I didn't feel I was up to that. And so I remember my professor handed me this brochure of like, hey, why don't you check this out? And it was just this delightful brochure of Marchutz that was just everything I could possibly have imagined wanting in a study abroad program and learning about art. Just looking at just the way they talked about focusing on seeing, and the way the classes were in English, which was delightful, but you were still immersed in the French culture, and that you were they looked at various aspects of art history, and I was like, man, I have got to go to this place. So I was originally set to study abroad in my junior year of college, and due to some family circumstances that fell through at the last minute, with about just a few weeks before I was supposed to go. So I ended up studying abroad my senior year, and at that point I started getting this feeling of like, oh man, maybe I've just dreamed about this and lived this up in my head for so long that I'm overplaying this. I'm overthinking it in my head, and it's not really going to be that great. But it was as great as it had been in my head. It was even better being there in person. I just remember being there and feeling like, okay, not just was it incredible to be there painting in the French countryside, but I feel like, that's in itself is, I think, a big sell of the Marchutz program, but I think their actual philosophy of art is something that really just made so much sense to me, and just I was just felt like I had always had these certain artistic instincts of why some art seemed good and not others, and others seemed kind of not that interesting, but I didn't know why. And I felt like Marchutz kind of gave some principles, which I later explored further in the master's program, that started making, art as a practice and painting make more sense to me. Just to focus on seeing, and seeing and looking at art closely being the the foundation of painting, of really any artistic practice was, I think, really helpful in focusing more on the scene and the looking at nature over and prioritizing that over technique was I think something that that I think started like, okay, this is making sense. And I had a really wonderful time. There were some just some personal challenges, I think, that semester for, um, but it was sort of like any of that was sort of just overshadowed by the just wonderful experience I had there. And when I left, at the end of the fall, I was just like, wow, I want to go back. And thankfully opportunity came to go back to for the master's program, and I'm so very grateful for that. And just continue working on um finding practice for painting. Oh, but here we have a couple paintings from uh when I was there the first time as an undergraduate. This is a dear Mary Hamilton, a little portrait there. And this is Hillary, who I think has been helping out some with Marchutz. Doing some knitting there. I remember painting them was both really delightful, and I just so fell in love. I always liked portraiture, but man, Marchutz really made me fall in love with it anymore, even more. Um, and I really enjoyed. So I felt like I was really able to go deeper into these, the concepts that Marchutz was talking about when I was there as a master's student. With kind of looking and just like really digging into some of the seminar topics they talked about with the I don't know, I just looking over in particular with the concept with just thinking about Van Gogh in particular, talking about color and how that relates to my own practice. When he says, well, one loses that general harmony of tones in nature by painfully exact imitation. One keeps it by recreating a parallel color scale, which may be not exactly or even far from exactly like the model. And then I repeat, learning from one's palette, from one's knowledge of the harmony of colors is quite different from following nature mechanically and servilely. Because instead of trying to reproduce exactly what I have before my eyes, I use color more arbitrarily as to express myself more vigorously. And I think that really those quotes and what Van Gogh is talking about is something I can really relate to in my own practice of just seeing nature as the basis and looking from life as the basis for what I'm doing, but not I guess being a slave to nature, and to be thinking about um painting as a way um of expressing of that, getting that feeling of what it's actually like to be there. So I think one, if I can pull out a painting here. um so I had this painting in my show recently, and someone was asked me, so I've been to Venice. Oh, I've been to Venice, and the water doesn't look like that. It looks all choppy in your painting. And, when I was there, it seemed very placid and kind of brown. And I said, well, I kind of explained, like, well, I think part of it is, where I was, there were boats there chopping up the water, and there are some little boats there that kind of blend into the water. I was explaining, the other thing is that the nature is constantly changing, and I would be looking and seeing, and I would see, wow, I can kind of see some yellow reflection there, and sort of be painting that yellow in there, and then I would be see, okay, it's kind of darker, maybe more purplish over here, and then I think there's something too about just, it just felt like I was seeing so much and wanted to paint so much in the painting. And then at the same time, just feeling this overwhelming sense of awe at being there, and excitement, and just that excitement I couldn't help but to come across, in the painting. So I think at times, people maybe think that my paintings are maybe kind of abstract or possibly chaotic. I'm not sure. But I think, to me, a lot of times it's that excitement at what I'm seeing that I think really drives my practice, and just thinking about how I can, filter through nature, and in a sense of what Van Gogh talks about, creating a parallel harmony with nature to show something about kind of the truth of what that experience is. And So I think that's something that really resonated me at Marchutz, that continues in my practice. I think there's also thinking about like with still life, for example. This is one of I remember this was one of Dear John's favorites, which is why I brought it out today. And just really so delighted me how excited John would express himself and looking at something, and just wanting to see that same excitement and the simplicity of things and enjoying life, and also in painting. And I remember him just talking about different strokes as they related to each other, and trying to create the whole of the painting. And I I think one thing that in particular with doing still lifes that has really interested me is thinking about not really just the objects, but the way that they sit in space. And so when I paint a still life, I almost think just as much, if not more, about, the surrounding space as I do with the actual objects. Because the way they relate to each other and the space around them, I think is sort of, I don't know, that's just um I don't know, says so much more than just trying to focus on the object. I think the space around it can just say even more, and it's just something that I think is very visually delightful to consider and explore. So I think that's something that I've thought about, and so like, with this, like, thinking about how this is a more recent painting, but just thinking about the way I'm placing the object on the table, and what the kind of view is, and how it's gonna relate to the space around it, and thinking about, what sensation that is when you look at something from kind of a more far away perspective, and then thinking about how that changes the way in which I see the colors and the wall behind it. And I just remember Alan in particular talking so much in portraits about the different volumes of in creating when doing portraits, and thinking about, well, yeah, you have this volume of the head, but you also have, the volume of the air and the space around the person. And thinking about how those relate to one another. I remember this being really delightful to paint another Marchutz students, and then just thinking about John would always just set up the space so wonderfully with a different class behind the person, and then that kind of class seems to kind of change, or what I would pick up with on would change in relationship to who was sitting and what their what they were wearing and their complexion, and what, even though I would just focus on trying to paint the person as, best I could with the tools I had, I think oftentimes person's disposition or personality could not help but to come through in the visual aspect of painting. And I think that's something, I don't know, I think there's something in portraiture that I find really interesting, and just thinking about people as inherently valuable, inherently worthwhile. And I was really drawn to because of that, portraiture of, like Van Gogh or Rembrandt or Marceau, who I studied more in depth of at Marchutz, and really so delighted in that, and just the way that they would explore use painting as, have this kind of spiritual sense, I think, in some of those portraits, and seeing people as um like, there just seems something in their portraits that really dives deep into them, which I think really resonated with me. um and so even now, I've really enjoyed portraiture. This is a more recent portrait that he was sitting for us while wearing his roller skates, which you can't really see, and talking about his life story, which I thought was a really wonderful juxtaposition. But I just find that every person, or every landscape, or still life I'm in front of, I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to approach it with a particular style. I'm just trying to look at it and paint what I see and how I relate to it as, accurately as possible. But so people will say, oh, so did it take you a while of, to find your style? And I'm like, well, I wasn't really trying to find a style. I'm just trying to paint what I see in front of me. And, if it all kind of seems like a particular style, then I suppose that's because, they're all painted by me, and I guess I see the world in a particular way. Um, so, anyways, those are kind of like some of the big highlights of what I really, kind of, uh, learned about at Marchutz. And I guess another point I wanted to sort of mention, which Barry brought to mind um as we were talking right before the interview, was just thinking about which I think just adds another layer to the program, is just art as it relates to one another, and using art as a way to build those relationships. And just that, we can be so different, and yet, there's similar, there's common things that we can build upon. And I never seemed like at Marchutz that the person who is the most similar, from the most similar background as me, was necessarily going to be the person who I was going to be able to connect with over art the best. because the someone was from a similar background, but they weren't willing to connect with the art, or weren't willing to connect and be a part of the group discussion, and discuss the art, together, then that was gonna be harder to relate to, and to have that similar kind of appreciation. But I think when you have art as that, it's almost kind of like the art is kind of a mediator for relationships, in terms of just being at the Louvre, the art museum, and thinking about just being in front of, like, a Rembrandt, like Bathsheba, and thinking about just all the different visual relationships to one another, and us just being able to share that, and then thinking about uh why we get certain sensations from a painting or from something visual, is something that was um I think lend itself to having deeper conversations with one another, and thinking about the way that we move through life, and the way we see things in life. It sort of, the discussion of the painting extends to beyond just painting. It speaks to life and our experience in life, and it speaks to some of our longing for meaning, and um deeper things, or more perfect world. And I think that was something that I think was definitely, that, as much as Marchutz taught me about art, it also really taught me about a lot about life, and relating to other people, particularly people who are a lot different from me. Um, and so I think those are kind of, the things that kind of carry with me today. I have a studio practice here in Indianapolis. I rent out a studio space, about 5 minutes from my house. And I paint there. I try to go, a few times a week, whether that's in the studio or on the landscape. More recently, I've been building a lot of frames. I had a show recently that I put on that had a lot of my paintings from Marchutz, which I hadn't really um shared, here in Indianapolis. And so that was a really wonderful time to be able to reflect on some of the things I'd done at Marchutz, and um especially in preparation for thinking about this talk and everything. And just I guess the additional thing that I've not mentioned, that I've been framing a lot, and I think that's sort of been something that's I've added to my practice since being at Marchutz, is just seeing the frame as an extension, in a sense, of the painting, and a way of further uh being able to relate, the frame to what's going on in the painting. They tend to be pretty simple frames, as you probably have seen, but thinking about, the thickness of the frame, and what the stain is, and just really enjoying exploring the colors there, and seeing what relationships I can find, and different stains with what they bring out in the actual painting, has been really fun. And just doing a little bit more watercolor, and like wash, especially if I travel more, as particularly like on the plane, I'll more likely just bring a little like watercolor set I still have from the lovely papeterie Michel, and X. And so I think that sort of, I don't know, I think I tend to approach the water mediums a little differently, maybe because I don't feel as apt at them, but it seems, or maybe it's something, kind of inherent in the medium itself of just feeling like I need to be a little more careful and more carefully laid in the strokes I put with the watercolor. Um, so yeah, so that's a little bit about what I'm doing now, and I guess we can open up to any questions if that's all right with you, Rose. I'm not sure. I don't really have anything else planned in terms of the talk, but I'm sure there's a lot we can discuss in terms of just whatever questions you guys might have.
Yes, thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so wonderful. Does anyone have any questions right off the bat? You can just sort of raise your hand like this and make sure to unmute yourself, and we can go from there. Any questions for now? Jennifer, I have a question.
Yes.
I'll start things off. Do you have some favorite places in Indianapolis that you've found are sort of feeding your landscape painting, desire for landscape painting? Because I'm imagining that after X and after Venice and after Giverny, it might be a little bit difficult to find, landscapes that could compare. Do you have some close to home that you have been enjoying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did, really struggle that when I first came back to live in Indianapolis. It's definitely a lot different, very flat, not tons of water. But and definitely some parts of Indianapolis just very, my personal opinion, not very aesthetic, not really the kind of architecture that we talk about at Marchutz and John's architecture tour, or reading Christopher Alexander. Um, but I think over time I've been able to find certain motifs. Like along the White River, I don't have a painting of that to share, although I do definitely have on my website or Instagram. So like along the White River, I've done a couple paintings there, and in my neighborhood, Woodruff Place, it's on got a lot of um uh like kind of Victorian homes,
Mm.
and kind of boulevard streets with fountains in the middle. So some of those fountains have been really nice. I've enjoyed painting different trees or along the canal. So I'll kind of at different points take different kind of exploratory trips to sort of find different motifs. This is um a painting I did at Versailles State Park, which is spelled like Versailles, but um, they pronounce it Versailles. And so this was one I did last fall. They kind of so I just found like this simple scene of the two trees just glowing with the fall colors. I guess that's one thing that I've really enjoyed about Indiana, is that they have really nice fall colors.
Mm.
And I think is, I've definitely enjoyed doing some really nice, good painting here in the fall, with seeing all those really vibrant fall colors, and different, finding different places where there's um water and such. This painting behind me, which you can see part of, is in Indianapolis, very close to where I grew up. It's standing on top of the hill looking down, and just finding, I mean, it's really just a completely flat field and blue sky, but I just, sort of, as you can maybe see, I don't know what you can see from there, but sort of was sort of took some parallel harmony with nature, as Ringo would say, and really made things not really like the model at all, and putting all different kinds of colors in the sky and the land, and finding the way that they could relate to those to sort of get that sensation of just being up there and seeing this large field. But anyways, so this was painted in Versailles, Indiana State Park. And I think just finding simple things like this, or like, that was not, it has been helpful, of like, hey, it doesn't need to be something really complicated in order to be able to just, sort of have that speak to me in a way that I, can paint and think about the relationships of the different the trees to one another was really delightful, and the way they just glow against sort of the more green but kind of turning orange leaves here. And I really enjoyed that. I don't know, does that answer your question? Oh,
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Patricia, do you have a question?
I do. Jennifer, it's so interesting to hear your reflections, especially about your current practice.
mm,
And so one of the things that the picture of trees that you just showed us reminded me of that one reminded me of the pastries, the desserts picture that you showed earlier.
oh
Where it
yes.
is.
Yes, you
See
are
what I
very right
mean?
about that.
Look at that. So, and one reason I thought about that was the way in which at Marchutz, to get ready to go paint something really difficult like Venice, you start off with still life, which can
Mm,
be thought of as like a miniature landscape, or a landscape can be thought of as a large dessert, those pictures,
mm,
those trees. And so this way of thinking about relationships between different entities, or different, not objects, but different relational aspects of a particular painting, struck me as really important in your work. I have one of your paintings that is from Indianapolis, I believe, and it's just a street
yes,
scene in snow. And the most important parts about it are the um, poles for the street lights and some
yeah,
cars. And I thought,
yeah,
oh, this is a really good example of the fact that you don't need to be in a fancy place like Venice to find a motif, to see some echoes. And so I wonder what you thought about that. Are you seeing relationships recur as patterns in your work, not necessarily as, oh, this is my style, but are there
yeah,
kinds of structures that you find to be echoing in your work?
yeah. Wow, that brings up some really good points. Oh, thank you for sharing, Patricia. Yeah, I think yeah. So that painting that you have is actually painted outside my bedroom window. Well, I live in a studio apartment, so really, just my apartment window looking over two very what tend to be pretty busy streets. And it was a snow day, and I was like, wow, this snow is just crazy. And I'm just, I don't know, it was just I don't know, just seeing the different structural elements be obscured by this, weather. And as you were talking, it reminded me of that. It reminded me, oh man, now that I think of it, I don't have it with me, but of just painting in Venice. And, painting the buildings of Venice, but it being like so windy and rainy that, the structure gets kind of obscured by the rain and the water. So I think that's sort of a similar type of motif. I think also the motif of um painting from high up, like from
Mhm.
here I had several paintings from Parc Jourdain and Aix-en-Provence that was kind of looking down, almost like if you're familiar with like some of Pissarro's paintings, looking down on the streets of Paris. And just seeing the little people kind of walking as little black strokes. So I think like looking from above is kind of another motif. I think like the sort of like the two objects or objects lined up, or like in different kinds of pairings would maybe be another one. So like, I don't know, like kind of these of thinking about like, you know, these two different plants together here, or like I had this plant and a plum, and I was just interested in the way that they, you know, they were just both these purple, very kind of different, you know, objects and structure and theme, but just seeing the way they relate to one another, this tall one and this round one, and how they relate to this complementary color of the yellow, which I don't know, I think yellow is a big theme in my work. So this was some goldenrod, which I had a bigger version of, that's of a different sort of approach. So I think those would maybe, does that, I don't know, does that answer your question, Patricia? Or is that kind of what you were asking?
It is, well, even that last picture of goldenrod that you're just holding up, yeah. I mean, I can construe this as weather.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So this way, I was thinking that instead of, I'm not sure if this is the way you would, in fact, it's not what you were just saying. It's the opposite of what you were just saying, is that somehow the obscured snow, rain, wind, and here blossoms, somehow you're seeing the structure within that. What's holding up the blossoms? What's holding up the buildings? Or how do we see just, you know, a glimpse of a side of something through all that mist or snow? That's one of the things about your work that really appeals to me. It feels really organized, not you know, reactional or something like that. It feels like I'm always aware there are branches that are holding those blossoms. So I don't know if that's, you know, obviously you're not planning to do that, but that's the overall effect for me, is that there's this kind of organized whole. So I guess some of that might be how you see what a painting needs as you're going along, that would strengthen that overall impression.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of that kind of structure is something that kind of comes, I think, somewhat subconsciously. And of course, you know, at Marchutz, you know, we really, you know, focused a lot on studying paintings from art history, and something I've continued to do. I've been doing like a lot of, for example, copies of like just like drawings and watercolor sketches of different Cezanne paintings, which of course have just really incredible structure to them innately. So I think some of that sort of, you know, it almost kind of like just seeps in subconsciously through the work, and, you know, kind of just seeing, you know, what does the painting need to hold this together, as you were talking about.
Thanks.
Any other questions if you have one, Marie?
Oh, I want to say hi, Jen. Hi. Good to see you.
Hey, you missed it, but I have a little painting of you here.
Can I ask if that was her?
Yeah, I love that. And hey, I did want to make, it's not so much a question, but a comment that I too have been making my own frames. And I think there's something beautiful about that process of really kind of like claiming, you know, solidifying a painting by framing, and also just, it's almost like gessoing. There's something about being in the process, like the tactile practice of making a frame is, it's fun. I've been enjoying it. I'm curious what your process is in making a frame, and if you do it in your studio, what kind of wood do you use? Just curious.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's great to hear. I love that you've been making your own frames as well, Hillary. So my typical process looks like going to Menards, which I think is maybe just a Midwest hardware store, but with like a grocery store basically in the middle of it. But and getting some wood. So I sort of think about like I'll either get like this kind of like something more thick or something kind of thin like this or something kind of in between depending on how I want to frame it and what I think kind of just the painting needs. I think is somewhat instinctual based on just visually what in my head would look good, and then thinking about different what would work well together in terms of a color. So like this, the basis for this painting is actually the blue is a lot brighter, but I with the stain, it's like one of the Miniwax kind of, I think wax kind of stain. And so, but that was sort of kind of popped too much from the frame. It was distracting. So I went over it with a with a like a walnut stain, or I broke the color, as Bingo might say. And then similarly with this last show, I framed a bunch, like some from Venice and some still lifes, with a more of a pink. And I went over that with a kind of more like a little bit more of a gray color, so that it could sort of reflect some of the pinks in here, but also some of the grays, and also just not have because I never want the painting to be a distraction from the actual painting. It should just kind of complement it, be an asset in a way, a sort of, I don't know, almost like a mediation between the painting and everything else out here. So I don't know if that answers your question. A lot of times it's sort of a length, sort of just a, not something I necessarily plan out a lot. I'll have an idea in my head, but it's sort of, like with painting, it changes as I go along, and I sort of approach it in a similar way, and similarly get very invested in the process and make a mess. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. No, thanks for sharing. I think just in the brief glimpses that you shared of the frames, it added so much. So I just process was your work is
Thank
so
you.
beautiful, Jen. It's such a gift to see it again like this.
Oh, thank you. It's great to see you.
Oh, good to see you.
Alan, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Alan.
Oh my God, you're so lovely. Beautiful, your frames, my God. It's all so beautiful. But I'm dying, maybe I had to come on late because I couldn't get on. Did you already talk about that painting I've been looking at that painting that's sitting right behind you on my left all the time you've been talking, down below?
Oh, let me get that. Oh,
Yeah.
here, maybe you can see better. So
Can you pull that out? What is that?
I'm sorry, I need to get up for a moment, but I need to move some paintings from here. So this is actually, I did a similar painting when I was at Marchutz in 2017. I went with my mom, and one of her friends to see Handel's Messiah here, in the Indianapolis area. And I was, being a visual person, I was really so interested in just the way the musicians held themselves and interacted with one another, and just their body gestures. And I started making little sketches in the margin of the bulletin, listening to the concert, and then I came back to Marchutz and I painted a version of it of Handel's Messiah, and it had kind of a woman in a red dress. You may recall it was in the MFA show that you helped with at the end of the year. But then I came back and I got a lot of lovely feedback on that. And then I
Hold it
guess a year
straight,
and a half.
Jennifer.
What?
Hold it straight while you're talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. Is
That's
that wait? I'm not doing it very good at this.
That's good like that. Yeah, go ahead. There we go.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's beautiful. Go ahead. Keep talking.
So in 2021, I
Oh,
decided to do another version of it, and I was just looking through the sketches and saw the I had was the baritone singer had this deep rich voice and tall frame, and I decided I would try painting him in instead, and seeing what else I could create with this motif. And I don't know, I really enjoyed returning to that after a few years time. I thought that was so that's what that is. Did you have more to say, Alan? I would love to hear from you.
beautiful paint. Did you do it? Did you do it from a sketch drawing or just from your imagination? It's a beautiful, beautiful painting. My God.
Oh, thank you, Alan. So it was kind of both. It was mainly from the little sketches, but they're just sort of these small little sketches from, a margin of a bulletin. So I had a sort of, and it was kind of composite of various sketches, and so I had to definitely use imagination in terms of how I was gonna compose them all together, and then what I was gonna do with this space up here, because that wasn't something I definitely necessarily did a lot of sketches of, but I sort of, needed to somehow relate that space to what was going on here.
Wow. Pretty incredible. That red stroke, all kinds of strokes in the paint. I'm just looking at the red stroke that's on the right side of the box as it rises, right, the red stroke. Look, do you see the red stroke? Yeah, that stroke that rises up into the back of his coat, that is just genius. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Alan.
Oh my God, beautiful. My God, Jennifer. So when you had, the second question is, how did the public of Indianapolis respond to your work? I mean, it's incredible, your paintings.
Oh, thank you. I thought that I was happy with the way it went. I think at different times I've sort of struggled with presenting my work because I always get this sense of it, sort of, I think I've had different responses in the past of like, of people interpreting it as, oh, you're like trying to be abstract. And I don't really, that's not, I mean, of course there is abstraction in my painting, but that's not really what I'm trying to do per se. Or just people, sort of, I think being maybe, I don't know, just sort of feeling like it doesn't necessarily fit in a category, and at times feeling like people don't necessarily know what to do with that.
Mhm.
And I think being able to have, it was just a show that I set up. So it wasn't at like, it was a gallery space, but it wasn't like a established gallery. It was just space I rented out that has gallery walls and like some garage doors that lift up that give a nice open feel. And so I think it was helpful to be able to have it in its own space where I didn't feel like whether real or perceived, that it was being, because I think sometimes those kinds of things can get in our heads more than what people actually mean for them to. So I think being able to have it in its own space where people were just looking at my work was really helpful. And I thought I got a lot of great, a lot of helpful feedback. And I think people seemed to like they really enjoyed it. And sort of a few paintings. So I definitely feel like, for all the work that it took to put it on, it definitely felt satisfying and worthwhile.
Great. Beautiful work.
Oh, thank you, Alan. That always means a lot coming from you.
Have you got some, last question, have you got any community there, art community? Have you got anybody that you can talk to about what you're doing that gets you? Or is it hard?
Yeah, so I think in a sense, I feel like I always get the best feedback from, or in terms of my painting and like people getting me in a sense, probably from just following Marchutz people online and just, messaging each other, seeing like, oh, hey, what's Miranda doing? And, and getting her feedback, or, getting a message from, dear Mary Leone, and, stuff like that. But, a lot of my friends in real life are artists or creative people, and so I have a good friend here from Alicia, who's a painter here, and she's been really good to talk to, and my friend Johnson. I think he's kind of similar in the way he sees movement and painting, and it just, even at my art show on Friday night, I particularly had a lot of artists, and I thought that was, I don't know, just helpful to get their feedback, and including actually a teacher I had from high school at the college downtown. They did some community classes, so it was helpful to get like his feedback and some more established artists. But in terms of, I don't think there's any really exist any kind of parallel Marchutz universe in Indianapolis, if that's what you mean.
Jennifer.
And that doesn't have to be your last question.
Are there any other questions? I want to be sensitive to the time. We're getting to be close to 8 o'clock, or depending on where you are in the world, 2 o'clock. So if there's any last questions, we can take those. And of course, if people want to stay on longer, we can continue the discussion. But for those of you that have to run, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to hear more from Jennifer. No? Well, then maybe we can wrap up here. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for talking with us and sharing a peek into your practice. This has been so much fun. And thank you to all of you for joining from near and far. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces, and we really appreciate you coming on today. And a big round of applause for Jennifer. Thank you for taking the time to prepare the talk and share it with us. We really appreciate it. And I'll follow up with the recording of this call too for everyone. If you want to share it with anyone that wasn't able to make it, I'll send that to your email.
All right, I just want to say thanks for these kind comments over here, Susan and Andrea. Is that how you say your name?
Anya.
Anya. Oh, thank you for the help there. Yeah, that's I was unable to look as I was talking, but yeah, that's good to see that feedback.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Well, see you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
See you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
It's great to see you, Alan.
Oh, Jennifer, come see me. Come to X.
I know I need to. Ah,
I was
man,
just telling her about all the people that are here right now. She's got to come join the party.
We miss you.
It's so fun to see the room there at X. I was there in
Oh.
16. Hi, Jennifer. It's Carol.
Hey, Carol.
Hey, Alan. Fun to
Hey,
see your faces. And Patricia, hi.
yes, hello.
We're in a new spot now, Carol. New studio.
Oh, that's just so
Oh,
beautiful.
beautiful.
Makes me homesick for X in school.
Aw,
Thank you.
come back.
I will. I'm thinking about it.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Hi, Mick. I see you hiding in the dark over there.
Hey,
Hey,
Nick.
thanks for joining, Nick.
Where's Nick?
Hey, Kathleen.
He's in the dark.
Sorry, no, I'm here. Hold on. It's
I love that. I
I'm
love
just
that,
calling you out,
Jennifer.
I'm gonna end the recording.
What's that?
I said I loved
I
that.
can turn some